I'm Tara Jernigan, and I've been serving as a deacon in the Anglican Diocese of Pittsburgh for 12 years. What actually is a deacon is probably the biggest question that we've wrestled with, and we haven't wrestled it to the ground yet, I'll confess. First off, deacons are countercultural. And when we talk about servants in the church today, from a cultural perspective, we want to talk about what have you done? What is your function? And I think that's a big mistake within the church to talk about function at least first, because function flows from who we are in Jesus Christ. So Jesus doesn't come to us and say, what have you done for me today? He says, what have I done for you, and who have I made you to be? And so without leaning too heavily on an antinomian side or a legalistic side, we come out of doing and into being, and so we have this identity before Christ. Likewise, we're here to show Christ's service, and so a lot of the time we look at Acts 6, where the deacons are first ordained as being the foundational passage for deacons. But really, I think it's more the John 13 passage where Jesus is washing the disciples' feet, not because he is the lowest slave who would do that, but because he's the teacher who takes that part. I mean, it turns everything upside down. This whole model is countercultural, and that's what's so exciting about it, is that we are people who've been to seminary in order to serve. We've invested in order to invest more. That's really different from what our culture generally offers. Now, our deacons serve in a variety of different ways, and when we have no longer limited ourselves to just defining deacons by function, it becomes an even broader category of service. So most of our deacons serve according to their gifts and according to, obviously, their bishop's intent for them. And our bishops are very involved in how deacons are deployed and where they're deployed. But traditionally, our deacons have been catechists. Very early on in the history of the church, the deacons were the ones that were responsible for preparing people for baptism and bringing them into the church. Our deacons have also been those who do pastoral care and who engage people where their life has need. Deacons have also had some really fun roles throughout the church. They've been the bishop's bodyguards. In the early church, they were responsible for making sure nobody fell asleep. I'd love some of these jobs. I think it's wonderful. Deacons have also served in mission, and that's one thing that I absolutely want to underscore and make sure that I don't forget to mention, because even from the early days, Philip, for example, one of the original 7 deacons in Acts, goes out as a missionary. And so you see him going into Samaria with the gospel. You see him talking to the Ethiopian, who then takes the gospel home with them. So deacons have very traditionally served as well as missionaries, and that's something that I think is really powerful for the church today. Oh my. I think really the most heartbreaking misunderstanding within the church, and it's one that thankfully is fading away, is this idea that deacons are deacons because for whatever reason they couldn't be priests. Part of the abundance of the order, whether in one model or another, part of the abundance of the order is for God to call his people out of all walks of life who are very gifted in core areas of ministry, and who've dedicated a good portion of training to that and a good portion of their formation to that, in order to use them as deacons, specifically as deacons. And so when I see folks who very obviously have a lot of gifts and talents and a vibrant ministry within the church, who are remaining deacons out of that sense of abundance and that sense of God's call to remain in the diaconal order alone and not become priests, that to me, it's a little bit countercultural, it's a little counterintuitive, but it's a sign of what God is really doing with the diaconal order. So first and foremost is a real and living faith in Jesus Christ. We need training in that, along those lines, in Scripture, and our deacons need to know their Scriptures just as well as as any priest, as any bishop, as any lay catechist. Again, if we're to return to a catechesis, we need to know our Scriptures. We need to have a sense of our Anglican identity and a sense of the history of the church, and to know where we came from, how to tell the stories of the church. So those things are kind of foundational, we might say academic. But then there's the on-the-ground ministry side of it, and I think dioceses do really well to train deacons locally for the on-the-ground needs. If we're the boots on the ground, we need to know what that ground looks like. So experiential and relational training is a really important part of what we do as well.